Well, Michael was the type A alpha male that was extremely motivated and successful and career-oriented. But then there was also the large teddy bear side called Desmond. That was your friend, that was generous, that was kind-hearted, that he was the one that was more pathos-oriented, whereas Michael was more, the intellectual side. We're really going to miss him. But one of the reasons why I came here today, Paula, is that I talked with my mother and my father this morning, Margaret and Bill, and my aunt and uncle, and we all decided actually, well, what can people do besides volunteer? Because it seems like I tried to donate blood the first day this thing happened. I was unable to.
Yeah, too many people were lined up, which is a
wonderful.
Very positive thing
really
to say
is,
about New Yorkers.
Yesterday,
who get a pretty bad rap.
Everyone's getting frustrated, saying, "I want to help. I want to help." And what I think is best to do actually, there's two things. Number one, everyone kind of sits around, they know someone actually, but you're afraid to call. You're afraid to just pick up the phone and deal with reality of another person's loss. But I'm asking you to please go out and do that. Because as much as it's almost annoying to hear the phone ring all day, it's a lot worse to deal with the painful silence of the realities of the death of a loved one. And, my father, was said it last night, got another phone call, but he was smiling also because it's just a respite. And anything is good. And number two, actually, please go out and visit someone that you know that has lost someone. I know that's probably even more dangerous because people are afraid. I'm not trained in this. I don't know what to say. Well, just stop by under the ruse of saying, listen, I brought some food. I have a gift certificate to a delicatessen or a restaurant, and you may not want to do it now, but it just gives you the opportunity to go to someone else and say, I care. I'm trying to empathize with you, and anything that we can do is okay with us, and please let us. And just that 30 seconds at the door makes the afternoon.
You are showing tremendous strength here this morning, and I have one final question for you.
Sure.
And yet we know that there are thousands of families that are basically wandering from hospital to hospital to try to get some piece of information about their loved ones. They are saying that folks are helping them as much as they can, but simply the demand on the resources of these hospitals is great. Any advice for those folks?
Yesterday I was there, and people were calm, people were generous. I think actually the thing I might suggest actually is to spend time with your loved ones, and you're going to get frustrated trying to get information that's not there. And I think sometimes the best thing to do is trust the professionals, and like EMS and the hospitals and the government officials, I think are working as hard as they possibly can in this situation. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do, actually, Tennessee Williams said it best in The Glass Menagerie, you attempt to find emotion for what's lost in the present. So you think if you go out and do something, it's going to change the reality, and it doesn't. And just spend time, call your friends, call your family, and just stop by and hug, someone that's lost someone, because a lot of people have been affected by this, including myself.
There's a lot of power to what you're saying here this morning, William.
Thank you.
It was good of you to join us at such a tough time for your family. You were asking on Americans to volunteer in any way they can, and we should remind you that all the way across the country today around noon, you're going to hear church bells pealing. To honor the victims of this horrendous tragedy that our nation is enduring. The National Cathedral will be the place where the President will be going at around 11:45. We'll be covering that prayer service live. The President calling on Americans all over the country, if they can, and most employers are encouraging this, to go to your normal place of worship and pray for the families who have been decimated by this, and for the whole nation as well. I wanted to share with you now, very quickly before we go back to Atlanta, something that happened here in New York City last night, and that is that Broadway theaters reopened their stage doors for the first time since Tuesday's deadly attack, and though showing mixed emotions, New Yorkers filled the seats. And before the curtain went up, all 23 Broadway theaters dimmed their lights, and the cast of the producers, and I hope we can show you this tape, finished off the night on a patriotic note, singing God Bless America. And the audience stood and joined in. And hopefully right now we can take a short pause, and you can see what happened when the whole staff of the producers joined in that spontaneous singing of God Bless America. Do we have that tape? Clearly, sentiment felt throughout the country. Senator John Warner saying the first day of this tragedy that in spite of this being one of our darkest hours, perhaps maybe we will begin to exhibit some of our greatest strength. And I think Darren and Leon, I have seen displays of this throughout the city. Yesterday I saw men and women wrapped in clothing that looked like the American flag, walking up and down the streets, waving flags, and certainly, if anything, we are seeing a powerful display of patriotism in some places as we are enduring one of our darkest moments.
I'm very glad you were able to get that piece of tape on from the producers last night. I saw that earlier this morning, and I can't help but thinking that that has got to be maybe the best performance of any kind that we are going to see on Broadway.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice as they turned the camera the other direction, you could see people wiping away tears. A lot of tears, and not just in New York City. And I know the folks in New York are concentrated on what is happening there as well. They should be. But those signs of patriotism and the tears are spread clear across America and the world as well.
And we were just talking here off camera about we weren't alive back then, but we've got to think that had to be what it was like during World War II.
To hear that song.
Yeah, and during World War II.
Absolutely.
Same sort of rallying around the flag around here.
It's going to be yet another emotional day, perhaps the most emotional day since Tuesday, as Paula was mentioning, the president calling for a National Day of Remembrance and prayer. You will see the service from the National Cathedral in Washington about 40 minutes from now. We'll bring that to you live. And we'll have more on that just ahead. Also, the stories continue to come out, and we put faces with the numbers of the people who are missing.
Remarkable development. We've got a number of developments that we're following this morning in our extensive coverage here of America's new war. Here now are the latest facts that we have uncovered. CNN has just obtained the names of the 18 suspected hijackers. And many of the suspects were licensed pilots. We bring you their names shortly here. But in the meantime, as you can see there, rain is hampering the search operation as the wreckage that was once the World Trade Center towers there continues to be plowed through by those who are volunteering there and others. Authorities have recovered the flight data and the cockpit voice recorders from the hijacked plane that crashed into the Pentagon. President Bush is leading a national day of prayer and remembrance for the thousands of people killed in the terrorist attacks. We've been watching as dignitaries have arrived there at the National Cathedral. You see there the former Defense Secretary William Perry and his wife there. They've just arrived. We saw them when they walked in. I'm sorry, William Cohen, excuse me, that is former Defense Secretary William Cohen, forgive me for that, and his wife there in the National Cathedral. Now, speaking of the Defense Secretary, the Pentagon is planning on having activated up to 50,000 reserve troops. We'll follow that story. The Pentagon's also having 3 separate remembrance services there at the Pentagon today as well.
We were talking about tears coming from the heavens today. Rain making conditions slippery and dangerous for searchers digging through the wreckage of the World Trade Center. Overnight thunderstorms briefly had to even suspend the effort because of the large use of metal in that machinery. 184 sets of remains have been recovered from the site. More than 4,700 people, though, are still listed as missing. Now, over at the Pentagon crash site, also the weather has been difficult in Washington, D.C. as well. Searchers have recovered the voice and flight data recorders from the jetliner that crashed into the building. Authorities say the devices are damaged, but they still could provide some crucial information about the flight's final moments. Authorities estimate at this time 190 people were killed in the attack on the Pentagon.
Now we have other news from Washington as well here. The Senate has just passed a $40 billion emergency aid package for New York and also for Virginia. And this is remarkable considering the fact that President Bush had asked for $20 billion and he got $40 billion here. There's also a resolution authorizing President Bush to use force against those behind Tuesday's terrorist attacks. That also was passed with a unanimous vote. House members delayed their vote on this measure until after lawmakers joined the president this morning for a national prayer service for those killed in the terrorist attacks.
We told you right off the top about a new development in the investigation, a new list that CNN has obtained of the 18 suspects that government officials believed are responsible and were on board those 4 planes that were hijacked and crashed on Tuesday. Our Mike Betcher is following the latest on the investigation. Go with us and take a look at the list and tell us what kind of information we can glean from that. Mike.
Well, this list was obtained and compiled by federal law enforcement sources. It is a list of the suspected terrorists who died on board those 4 aircrafts. The spellings on the list we will show you now are as they appear on federal documents and may vary from other spellings being used. On American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles that hit the second World Trade Center tower, Walid al-Shehri, Wael al-Shehri, a.k.a. Walid al-Shehri. Mohammed Atta, we'll talk about him more in just a minute. Abdul Al-Amari, Satam Sugami. Next, to United Airlines Flight 175 from Boston to Los Angeles. It hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Marwan al-Shehi, Fayez Ahmad, Mohad al-Shehi, Hamza al-Ghamdi, Ahmed al-Ghamdi. On United Airlines Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco, that is the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. Ahmed al-Haznawi, Ahmed al-Nami, Ziad Jarrah, Saeed al-Ghamdi. On American Airlines Flight 77 from Dulles to Los Angeles, that is the aircraft that struck the Pentagon. Khalid al-Midar, Mahed Moked, Narwaf al-Hazmi, Salem al-Hazmi. Now let's go back now to one of the people on board American Airlines Flight 11 that hit the Second World Trade Center tower. He is Mohammed Atta. We have some information on him, perhaps more than any of the rest of these people. Let's look at his travels over the past couple of years. He was in Hamburg, Germany in the 1990s, where he studied and got the equivalent of a master's in construction engineering. And then in July 2000 approximately, he showed up in Venice, Florida at a flight training school, Huffman Aviation, where he and another one of the people on the list of 18, Marwan al-Shehi, attained some initial flight training. They stayed with a man named Mr. Voss, who was their flight instructor. They didn't get along very well, apparently, with these two people in their house, and they asked him to leave. He then moved into a home in Coral Springs, Florida, rather an apartment. That was in December of 2000. And then also in December of 2000, he went to a company in Opelika, Florida, called FlightSim. Now, at this company, Atta and two other men, who we don't have the identities of, walked up and said, "We want to buy 727 simulator time." That's about $1,500 worth of time. The instructor said, okay. They paid in cash. And he said they were very interested in straight and level flight and how to make turns, but weren't very interested in takeoffs and landings. He thought that was very odd. And now, even though Mohammed Atta carries a United Arab Emirates passport, this man said he talked an awful lot about Egypt. From there, in August of 2001, we pick up the trail again in Pompano Beach, Florida, at Warwick Rental Car, where he rented 2 cars in succession over the period of about a month. The last car he rented, over a period of 2 weeks, he drove about 3,000 miles. So he was traveling an awful lot there in the last part of August and the 1st of September. Then he moves to Palm Beach County, Florida, where he took 2 refresher flights in a Piper aircraft. He said he wanted to refresh his skills, and he took only 3 flights, although initially he said he wanted to take 100 hours. And then he ended up in Portland, Maine. Right before Portland, Maine, though, he went to Boston, Massachusetts, rented a car from the Alamo car rental agency there, then drove to Portland, Maine, and then caught a connecting flight on Tuesday morning from Portland to Boston. And of course, we know what happened next. We're trying to develop the same information on the rest of the people on this list, but Mohammed Atta is one of the people that we know the most about, and it gives you an idea of the amount of preparation, the amount of money that was spent, and the fact is that this wasn't planned in a weekend. This was planned over a long period of time.
Fascinating stuff, how you're connecting the dots there, Mike. Thank you for that information. We'll check back with you. Also, for our viewers, if you'd like to see more of that information for yourself, the complete list and that information is on our website at CNN.com. Leon.
All right, you know, President Bush has declared today to be a day of prayer and remembrance. CNN's Judy Woodruff joins us now. She is at the National Cathedral in Washington, and she's got the story for us from